My name is Tessa, and Easter Sunday was supposed to be one of those rare days when my family actually came together without arguments or silent wars. You know, the kind of day when pastel colors, smiles, and family dinners drowned out the secrets no one wanted to talk about. But for me, that Easter Sunday turned into the day my heart cracked open, and a seed of revenge planted itself inside me. Before diving into the story, comment where you're watching from and don't forget to subscribe so you won't miss the latest stories. I remember standing by the dining room window, watching my younger sister, Haley, bounce around the driveway in her brand new designer dress. She looked like she belonged in some magazine ad for perfect daughters. She was only 20, but somehow my parents treated her like the crown jewel of our family. And me? At 25, I was the afterthought. The one who worked 2 jobs, the one who made herself small so everyone else could shine. But that Sunday, I finally saw the truth. The whole family had gathered, grandparents, cousins, even some neighbors were invited. Mom kept saying Easter wasn't just about tradition, it was about new beginnings. She had this strange sparkle in her eyes that morning, one that hinted she had something special planned. I thought maybe she finally saw me. Maybe she remembered how hard I'd worked the last few years to support myself without leaning on anyone. After church, we all came back to the house. The dining table was already loaded with glazed ham, deviled eggs, hot cross buns, and a cake shaped like a bunny. Everyone was laughing, eating, passing plates back and forth. The whole time, Mom kept glancing at Dad like she was waiting for the right moment. Finally, she stood up and clinked her glass. The room fell silent. "I have a very special surprise today," she announced, her voice glowing with pride. "Because Easter is about celebrating blessings, and I believe blessings should be shared." My heart skipped. Could it be me? Was she finally going to acknowledge how much I'd sacrificed, how many nights I'd stayed awake studying, how many bills I'd covered on my own, how I never once asked them for help? But then she took Haley's hand. "Sweetheart, you've worked so hard in school, and your future is so bright. You deserve this." Dad stood up too, reaching into his pocket for a set of shiny keys. Everyone gasped, and then they all rushed outside. Parked in the driveway was a brand new SUV, sleek, shining, and bold. The kind of car that screamed success before Haley had even earned it. The neighbors clapped, the cousins cheered, and Haley squealed like she'd just been crowned queen of the world. She hugged Mom and Dad, crying, "Thank you, thank you." I froze. My stomach knotted, so tight, I thought I might collapse. My vision blurred, but I forced a smile because every eye was on me, silently expecting me to clap and celebrate too. That's when Mom turned back to me. "And Tessa," she said, her voice softer, almost rehearsed. She held out a plain white envelope. My palms sweated as I took it. For a moment, I thought maybe it was a check. Maybe she couldn't afford 2 SUVs, but she still wanted me to feel special. I tore it open, heart hammering. Inside was a single folded piece of paper. A letter. It wasn't money. It wasn't anything valuable. It was just Mom's handwriting on a cheap stationery card. "Dear Tessa, we hope this encourages you to keep working hard and finding your path. Love, Mom and Dad." That's it. No gift card. No check. Nothing. The room blurred again, but this time from the heat in my face. Everyone had already turned back to Haley, swarming her, taking pictures with the SUV. No one cared what I was holding. No one asked. I stood there with that useless envelope in my hand, realizing in that moment, I wasn't just overlooked. I was invisible. Later, when dinner was served, I forced myself to sit at the table. The laughter around me sounded like knives scraping against glass. Haley kept showing off the car key fob, dangling it like jewelry. Mom and Dad beamed at her like she was everything they'd ever dreamed of. No one even noticed that I hardly touched my plate. But inside me, something was shifting. I wasn't jealous of Haley's car. It wasn't about the SUV. It was about the truth that Easter Sunday shoved in my face. My parents had chosen who mattered more. And it wasn't me. That envelope wasn't just an insult. It was a message. And I promised myself right then and there that one day they would regret sending that message. Because revenge is a dish best served cold. After that Easter Sunday, something in me broke. I didn't cry in front of anyone, not Mom, not Dad, not Haley, not the cousins who wouldn't have cared anyway. I waited until I was back in my small one-bedroom apartment, the same apartment I worked 2 jobs to afford, before I finally let the tears come. I sat on the edge of my bed, staring at that stupid envelope. The cheap paper crinkled in my hands as I tore it apart, shredding the letter into tiny pieces until they scattered across my floor like snow. That was the night I realized I wasn't family. At least, not in the way Haley was. To them, she was the daughter worth investing in, the daughter worth showing off. I was just background. It hadn't always been that way, though. When we were kids, Haley used to cling to me everywhere we went. I was 5 years older, so I protected her, babysat her, even gave up weekends with friends to watch her when Mom and Dad went out. I thought that made me the good daughter. I thought that was enough. But as Haley grew, things shifted. She was the pretty one, the social butterfly, the one teachers adored, the one who got lead roles in school plays, the one who never had to try too hard. I was quieter, more serious. I worked for my grades, studied late, and when I went to college, I paid for myself with student loans and late-night waitressing shifts. Mom and Dad always said they were so proud of me, but pride never turned into action. They never offered to help me with tuition. They never surprised me with anything more than a good luck text. Meanwhile, Haley's every achievement was rewarded with gifts, parties, vacations. That Easter wasn't the first time I'd felt the difference. It was just the loudest. And once you see the truth, you can't unsee it. The following weeks, I noticed everything sharper. I'd call Mom to check in, and she'd cut me off mid-sentence to gush about Haley's new internship. Dad would send group texts with family updates, but the photos were always of Haley. Haley at brunch, Haley at the beach, Haley posing in front of her SUV. I became a ghost in my own family. At first, I tried to swallow it. I told myself it didn't matter, that I'd build my own life, that I didn't need them. But anger is like a splinter. It digs deeper the more you ignore it. And the more I replayed Easter in my head, the sharper it cut. I couldn't stop thinking about the look on Mom's face when she handed me that envelope. That polite, forced smile. The way she said, "Keep working hard," like I was some charity case, like my worth was tied to how much I struggled. It wasn't just neglect. It was disrespect. And if there's one thing I can't stand, it's being disrespected. That's when the idea of revenge started to take root. It wasn't immediate. I didn't wake up one morning with a full plan. No, it crept in slowly, like shadows lengthening at sunset. At first, it was just fantasies, imagining their faces if I suddenly became successful, rich, untouchable. Imagining Mom's forced smile cracking when she realized I didn't need her approval. But the more I thought about it, the more it hardened into something real. Revenge didn't have to mean screaming matches or slammed doors. It didn't even have to mean hurting them physically. No, my revenge would be quiet, precise. I wanted them to feel what I felt. Invisible, overlooked, unworthy. And most of all, I wanted Haley to know what it felt like to have something she treasured ripped away. The question was how. One night, I was scrolling through my phone when I stumbled across a post Haley had made. A picture of her SUV, polished to perfection, captioned, "Blessed and grateful to hearts #dreamcar #family-love." The comments were flooded with praise. Friends calling her lucky, coworkers calling her goals, old classmates saying they wished they had parents like ours. That's when it hit me. Haley's entire identity was built on appearances, on being the one with the perfect car, the perfect life, the perfect family. If anything ever cracked that image, it would destroy her. And Mom and Dad? Their pride wasn't in me. It was in showing off Haley. So what better way to strike back than by tearing down the very image they adored? For weeks, I studied. I watched Haley's routines, memorized when she left for classes, when she parked her car, when she went out with friends. I learned where the SUV sat at night, which security lights worked, which didn't. At the same time, I worked harder at my jobs, saved every dollar, and built a plan for my own life, a plan where I wouldn't need them. Because revenge is sweeter when you rise above. The anger inside me was no longer a weight. It was fuel. And with every day that passed, I got closer to lighting the match. But little did I know, the fire I was about to start would burn far hotter than I ever imagined. For a long time, the plan lived only in my head, a cold list of petty little fantasies I'd mutter to myself when the house was quiet. I pictured Mom's face when strangers asked why she'd given Haley an SUV, but not me. I pictured Dad fidgeting as relatives whispered about fairness. I pictured Haley's smug Instagram comments drying up when her perfect life got a crack. It was cathartic to imagine, but it wasn't revenge. Fantasy is a warm bath. Revenge has to be a blueprint. That's when I realized if I wanted them to understand what I felt, I didn't need to humiliate them with lies or vandalize anything. I needed to force the truth into the light where it would sting them most, in front of people they cared about. The family's image was their currency. If that image lost value, their pride would feel bankrupt. So I began to collect evidence. Not the kind that could get me arrested, but the kind that would make a story. Old voice messages where Mom praised Haley's natural charm and brushed off my achievements. Photos from birthdays where I was cropped out of the family album. Screenshots of group texts where Mom congratulated Haley on minor things while ignoring real milestones in my life. I dug through drawers and cloud folders, pulling out receipts that proved Dad had funded Haley's college trips, while insisting I handle my own rent. It wasn't glamorous work. It was just record-keeping, a slow, meticulous assembling of the pattern I had felt for years but couldn't prove. The next piece was the story itself. I wasn't going to leak anyone's secrets for the sake of gossip. I wanted to tell the truth, my truth, in a way people could understand. So, I did something I'd never done before. I sat down in my tiny apartment, propped my phone against a stack of pizza boxes, and recorded myself. "Hi, I'm Tessa," I said, voice shaking the first time. But as I spoke, the shaking quieted. I told my story plainly. The sleepless nights working 2 jobs, the tuition payments that left me scraping by, the countless holidays when I ate secondhand compliments while Haley received tangible proof of love. I read aloud that stupid letter from Mom and described the moment the keys appeared in the driveway. I didn't name call. I didn't dramatize. I just told what happened, why it hurt, and how being invisible makes you small in public and furious in private. It was one take. No edits. No music. Just me and the rawness of my voice. Then I uploaded it. I didn't blast my parents' names. I didn't tag Haley. I titled the video simply, "The Day My Family Chose Her Over Me, A Daughter's Truth." I shared it to a few small community groups and anonymously to a forum where people told real stories about family pain. I posted it in places where authenticity wins attention, the kind of corners online where people don't want drama, they want validation. I expected maybe a handful of comments. I expected maybe a few strangers telling me to pick myself up and move on. Instead, it landed like a stone in still water. The first morning after I posted, my phone wouldn't stop buzzing. Messages poured in, women my age, older women, even men, sharing experiences eerily similar to mine. My parents did the same thing to me. "I'm sorry. They did to my sister what they did to you." Strangers said they cried listening, that my words mirrored something they'd never voiced. The video had things people recognized. It was a sharp, honest mirror. Then it spread beyond those corners. A local blogger reposted it with a headline about parental favoritism that caught fire. People I hadn't seen since high school messaged me with empathy. Even a colleague from my night shift told me she'd watched it during her break and cried in front of the freezer aisle. I expected relief, some emotion that meant the burden was lighter. What I didn't expect was the way the family reacted. Mom and Dad called. Not gently. They called like they'd been hit. Mom's voice was tight and cold at first, a tone I'd rarely heard from her. "Tessa, how could you?" she began and then paused, as if searching for the right performance. I could hear Dad in the background, saying, "We'll figure it out," in that same strained, practiced way couples use when they don't know what to say. Haley texted with a string of angry emojis and a single line. "Why would you do that?" She didn't ask if I was okay. She didn't ask about my reasons. She asked because her image had been disturbed. Neighbors called my parents. My aunt texted mom with, "Is it true?" Twitter and a few neighborhood Facebook threads had my family's name floating around like a kite with half its string. People started bringing it up in casual conversations at church and the bakery. Once a stranger knows your family story, your privacy becomes a public curiosity. It's a strange humiliation, like watching your mirror image twitch under a microscope. At first, Mom tried denial. She posted a family photo on her profile, smiling faces, captions about love and togetherness. Dad posted a short message about protecting our family privacy. But denial doesn't erase receipts. Old photos, voice messages, and group texts started resurfacing, shared by people who had seen the original video. Details spilled out, not because I named names, but because other people had their own flames of memory to add. The hardest part was watching Haley. She spiraled from confused to defensive to furious in a matter of days. People messaged her directly, many with hurtful things. Some friends untagged her in photos. Someone from her class posted a comment about how she acts like the world owes her everything. She posted a few defensively polished videos, laughter, faux sincerity, a tour of the SUV interior like it was a prop in a TV show. But the veneer had cracked. Even the people closest to her started asking questions she didn't have real answers for. And my parents? They retreated into a small, furious bubble. They came over to my apartment a week after the video went live. I opened the door, and they stood there, Mom with the same rehearsed softness, Dad with hands stuffed in pockets. They wanted an explanation. They wanted an apology. They wanted me to take it down. "I'm not taking it down," I told them. My voice was steady. The truth had weight behind it now. It wasn't just my fragile pain. It was a story others had recognized and named. I needed people to hear how it felt. I wanted them to know there's no such thing as a small hurt if it's repeated enough. Mom's face collapsed into something raw. "You made us look like monsters," she said. "You embarrassed this family. You made me feel seen," I replied. "I'm sorry it hurts you. But I'm not sorry for showing what you chose." That conversation didn't end with hugs or forgiveness. It didn't even end with raised voices, just a brittle, uncomfortable silence, as if we'd all stepped onto thin ice and were waiting to hear it crack. I watched them go, the way you watch a wave retreat after it's hit the shore, sucking things back into its mouth. The fallout was not revenge's final goal. It was the first blow. People were talking. My parents were shaken. Haley's Instagram comments were quieter. But there was one thing I didn't expect. My own chest didn't feel lighter. The vindication I'd imagined had a sour aftertaste. There was relief in being heard, yes, but also a hollowness where sweet revenge was supposed to be. I had started the fire. Now it was time to see how it burned, and whether I could stand the smoke. The weeks after the video felt like living inside a storm. My post had been the first gust, but now other winds blew. Older grudges picked up speed, new whispers joined the chorus, and everything that had been stable in my family began to rattle. I thought I was ready for this. I wasn't. The real turning point came on a Thursday night, the kind of night that smells like rain and regret. Mom called earlier that day, voice brittle, asking if we could meet to talk things through. I didn't want to. My apartment felt like the only safe place left in the world, but part of me still wanted the family I'd once believed in. I wanted to hear apologies, or at least explanations. Maybe I wanted them to see me as their daughter again. I agreed. We chose the Italian place on Main, neutral ground, public enough that everyone would be on their best behavior. When I arrived, Mom and Dad were already there, seated under the dim light, hands folded like they were rehearsing apologies. Haley followed, flustered, freshly made up, the kind of look she wore in pictures where everything was perfect. But tonight, the veneer didn't hold. "Thank you for coming, Tessa," Mom began. "We want to explain. We want to fix this." Dad nodded, but there was an edge to his nod, an insistence that they'd been attacked, not exposed. He talked about family respect, about privacy, about how airing our struggles online harmed us. He put the blame on me for taking things public instead of coming to them first. I listened. I had heard these words before in different arrangements, justified and balled into neat sentences. They wanted me to feel guilty for being heard. They wanted to control the narrative again. Then Haley spoke. Her voice had gone thin, brittle like frozen twigs. "I didn't know, Tessa," she said. "Why didn't you tell me?" "If I'd known, I would have," she stopped. The car keys in her purse jangled like an accusation. "I didn't mean for any of this." "You didn't mean for any of this?" I echoed. "You didn't mean for the way Mom and Dad put you on a pedestal while I got an envelope? You didn't mean for the scholarships I turned down because Dad said he'd help and then didn't?" They flinched. Mom's shoulders tightened. Dad's face hardened. This was the test, whether my words could crack the stone of their comfort. But then the restaurant phone buzzed. A notification. A waiter whispered something to the manager, who glanced over and then hurried away. People nearby stared. A woman at the next table leaned in and asked quietly, "Are you Tessa from that video?" It hit me then. The story I'd started wasn't just in our house anymore. It was out in the world, and that world had its own hunger. People wanted to know the messy parts of life. They wanted spectacle. I had given them truth, and truth, once released, moves on without asking permission. And then came the message I'd been dreading. A text thread started by someone from Haley's college had begun to circulate allegations. They weren't the kind I'd planned for. They weren't about money or favoritism. Someone had posted screenshots of a private conversation between Haley and a campus acquaintance, a conversation where Haley talked about using the SUV and what my parents bought me, in a tone that sounded entitled and dismissive. The screenshot thread was cruel. People added commentary, people tagged Haley's friends, and before I could fully understand what was happening, those comments were splashed across social media profiles and gossip apps. I watched Haley's face pale, as if someone had drawn the air out of her. Her fingers flew across her phone, deleting, pleading, begging, tagging, apologizing. It was a desperate choreography. She looked at me, eyes wet and terrified, and for a second I felt a stab of sympathy. Then I remembered the envelope. Then I remembered every ignored birthday, every holiday where I'd eaten their words and called a dinner. The restaurant's ambient noise swelled into an unbearable low hum. Our waiter came back, whispering that someone from the news had called, asking for comment. Someone else had screenshotted a family photo and added an insulting caption. People at nearby tables were whispering and pointing. The private conversation, my family's private life, had turned into content. This was the climax of everything I had started. The moment when the small stone in the pond meets the water's center and creates a ring that keeps expanding until it touches the shore. My actions had sent ripples, and the ripples were now waves that people were riding. Haley finally got up and ran out, phone clutched to her chest like a life raft. Mom sank into her chair like she'd been pushed. Dad's jaw clenched until I thought I might see the veins pop. We sat there like actors who'd been caught mid-scene, waiting to see if the audience would boo. When we walked out into the cold night, the car headlights felt like searchlights. A neighbor, Mrs. Lang from down the street, was standing on the sidewalk, her face a blend of pity and glee. "Oh, Tessa," she said, as if I'd done the favor of the decade. "You really showed them." That sentence lodged in my chest. I knew some people would see me as a hero, a brave daughter exposing wrongs. I also knew others would see me as a villain, a betrayer who'd let a family rot in public. Both were true. Both were parts of what I had become. In the days that followed, Haley withdrew. Her posts stopped. Her friends' messages dulled in volume. My parents oscillated between defiant and broken. The house that once smelled of cinnamon rolls and loud laughter now felt like a courtroom. And me? I had what I thought I wanted, the truth out, the favoritism exposed. But the cost was higher than I'd calculated. My family's reputation was tarnished. My sister's youth was scarred. The easy answers I'd hoped to find, apologies, reparations, a clean break, were nowhere. Instead, there were complicated, messy consequences that no single video could fix. Late one night, after a day of interviews and messages and more revelations, some true, some exaggerated, I sat on my apartment floor and thought about how thin the line had been between justice and cruelty. I had pulled back the curtain, yes. I'd made them see themselves reflected in my words. But I'd also let a crowd judge them in ways that could never be unmade. As the smoke cleared just enough for me to see the shape of my life again, I realized revenge had a momentum all its own. You can set it in motion, but you can't always steer where it lands. And in that realization was a new kind of fear, the fear that I had started something I couldn't control. That night, alone with the quiet hum of my refrigerator and the flashes of my phone screen, I asked myself a question I hadn't wanted to face. Had I sought revenge to heal, or had I used it to wound? The answer would come, but not tonight. Tonight, I held the envelope, now shredded and taped back together like some sad collage, and listened to the sound of rain on the window. The storm had come. The real fallout was about to begin. The storm eventually passed, but the wreckage it left behind didn't vanish overnight. When you go to war with your family, no one really wins. At least, not in the way you picture it when you first whisper revenge in the dark. Weeks later, I found myself back at my parents' house, standing in the same driveway where the SUV had once been polished like a crown jewel. Except now, it sat there unwashed, one of the side mirrors cracked from some careless night. Haley wasn't flaunting it anymore. She barely drove it. To her, the SUV had become a symbol of everything she lost: friends who stopped calling, classmates who whispered behind her back, and a family whose pride had curdled into shame. Mom opened the door, her face thinner, older somehow, like the weight of whispers had aged her. Dad looked tired too, the kind of tired that seeps into your bones when you're fighting battles you can't name aloud. We sat at the dining room table, the same table where I had once clutched an envelope while Haley jingled shiny new keys. The air felt different now, heavy, cautious. Mom spoke first. "Tessa, we need to talk." Her voice wasn't rehearsed this time. It cracked in places. She didn't look at me like I was a problem to manage. She looked at me like I was her daughter, maybe for the first time in years. "I know we made mistakes," she said, her hands twisting a napkin to shreds. "We didn't see you. We didn't give you what you needed. And I can't take that back. But I am asking, can we try again? Can we start over?" Dad, silent as always, finally added, "You were right. About a lot. I just didn't want to hear it." For a moment, I didn't know what to say. Part of me wanted to scream, to remind them of the envelope, the birthdays forgotten, the years of being invisible. Another part of me wanted to collapse into their arms and feel what I'd craved all along: acknowledgement. Haley sat across from me, arms crossed, eyes red from too many nights of scrolling comments she couldn't erase. When our eyes met, she looked away quickly. For once, she wasn't the center of the room. For once, she didn't look like the crown jewel. "I didn't mean to take everything from you," she whispered suddenly. I thought that was just how things were supposed to be. I didn't realize how much it hurt you. And now, I feel like I've lost everything too." Her words were small, but they pierced. I realized something in that moment. My revenge hadn't just hurt my parents. It hadn't just toppled their pedestal. It had gutted Haley too. She wasn't innocent, not by a long shot, but she was young. And I had dragged her into the fire without warning. I took a deep breath. "I didn't post that video to destroy you," I said. "I posted it because I was drowning, and no one in this house noticed. I needed someone to see me. And if that meant strangers on the internet, then so be it." No one spoke for a long time after that. The only sound was the ticking of the old wall clock, counting down the seconds of our silence. Finally, Mom reached across the table and took my hand. It wasn't the polished, practiced grip she gave at church. It was trembling, raw. "I don't know if you'll ever forgive us," she said, "but I'm asking you to let us try to do better." And for the first time, I didn't pull away. The months that followed weren't perfect. My parents didn't magically transform into model parents, and Haley didn't suddenly stop craving attention. But something had shifted. They checked in on me more. They celebrated my small wins without turning the spotlight away. They didn't fix everything, but they tried. And sometimes, trying is the most radical change of all. As for me, I learned something I hadn't expected. Revenge gave me a voice, yes, but it didn't heal me. Healing only came when I stopped looking at my family as enemies to punish and started looking at myself as someone worth loving, even if they never gave me what I needed. The SUV still sat in the driveway, a monument to the Easter that cracked us open. Every time I saw it, I remembered the sting of that envelope. But I also remembered the fire it lit in me, the fire that forced me to stop being invisible. One quiet evening, I took the shredded envelope pieces I had taped back together and placed them in my journal. Not as a wound, but as a reminder of where I came from, of what I endured, and of the strength I found when I refused to be silent. Because revenge wasn't the end of my story. It was the spark that started it. The real ending was this: I was no longer invisible. I had made them see me, and in the process, I had learned to see myself. And sometimes, that's the sweetest revenge of all. And in the end, I realized revenge wasn't about destroying them. It was about finally being seen. And that changed everything. If you felt this story, don't forget to hit that like button, share your thoughts in the comments, and subscribe for more powerful stories just like this. Your support means everything. See you in the next one.